I still remember the way the chandelier light hit my dress that night, soft, golden, almost forgiving. Like it was trying to protect me from what was coming. But nothing could have shielded me from Ethan's words. We were at the Langston Gala, an annual event crawling with industry elites, investors, and legacy families with last names that opened doors I wasn't even allowed to knock on. I had borrowed a gown from a stylist friend and kept my back straight, chin up, just like Ethan had coached me. Smile, be polite, don't talk too much about your job. My job, of course, being the assistant to a local gallery director. Not exactly the type of thing the finance crowd found impressive. But I had dreams, even if I didn't say them out loud. Ethan had always been charming. Polished. Handsome in that way that got you seated early at restaurants and photographed at events. He said he liked me because I was different, real, grounded. But what he meant was, I didn't belong in his world, and he liked being the one who let me in. Then, during dessert, it happened. We were seated at table 7 with a few of his coworkers, all dressed like success with something you could wrap around your shoulders. Ethan had been drinking more than usual, laughing a bit louder. And then someone made a joke about power couples. One of the women, sleek and bitter behind her champagne glass, tilted her head toward Ethan and said, "So what does she do?" Ethan didn't flinch. He didn't glance at me for permission. He just smiled and said, "She's my charity project." The table erupted in uncomfortable laughter. Mine stayed silent. "She's got heart, I'll give her that," he went on, as if this was all so casual. "But let's be honest. She's not exactly corporate material." The woman laughed like that was the funniest thing she'd heard all night. Someone else muttered something about dress-up Barbie. Ethan topped off his own drink, grinning. I waited for the apology, the nudge, the whisper that it was all a joke. But it never came. When I got up from the table, Ethan barely noticed. When I left the room, no one followed. Outside the ballroom, I sat alone on the cold stone steps, wrapping my arms around myself. I wasn't crying. Not yet. The humiliation hadn't settled in fully. But I could already feel the crack in my chest beginning to form. That night, I didn't go back to Ethan's apartment. I didn't answer his texts. I just vanished from his life, one unread message at a time. He never looked hard enough to find me. But that was fine. I wasn't lost. I was getting ready. I spent the next 6 months in silence. While Ethan went on with his life, business trips, promotions, a new girlfriend plucked from the same Ivy League crowd, I packed up mine. I quit my job, sold everything I didn't need, and took the seed money from my father's tiny inheritance and placed a bet on myself. I moved across the country, enrolled in night business classes, and taught myself everything I could about startups, investment cycles, market behaviors. I worked days as an analyst's assistant and nights coding prototypes for a marketplace idea that would later get picked up by a mid-sized VC firm. I signed it under a pseudonym, L. Carter. It felt cleaner that way. Less like the girl Ethan used to know, more like the woman I was becoming. When the firm I was working for started looking into distressed tech acquisitions, I pitched a silent buy-in strategy for companies that were bleeding out but still had name recognition. My model worked. It worked so well that I got invited into partnerships I never dreamed I'd sit in. I kept quiet, though. Always behind the curtain. Always the anonymous signature on the wire transfers. By the time I turned 30, I had equity in 6 companies, a seat at a private fund's board table, and a closet full of black suits that fit me better than any borrowed gown ever had. And then one day, I got an alert on my phone, an acquisition target report. A mid-sized but once prominent fintech company was hemorrhaging money, begging for capital, and desperate for a savior. The name of the company? Saratech. Ethan's company. I stared at the screen for a full minute before I let myself laugh. After all these years, I didn't have to search for him. He came straight to me. And this time, I wasn't the one trying to prove I belonged. This time, I was the one signing the checks. Saratech wasn't the same company it had been 5 years ago. Back when Ethan used to brag about its exponential growth and how they were on the verge of becoming the next Stripe, it had weight in the tech scene. Their leadership had been flashy, their branding bold, and their press team aggressive. But the headlines had gone quiet, and the innovation had stalled. Now, they were bleeding cash. The internal report showed declining revenues, poor morale, and a series of bad hires at the executive level. I skimmed through the spreadsheet breakdowns, board memos, and valuation assessments with professional calm, but the truth underneath made me feel something closer to poetic justice. Ethan's name popped up multiple times. His department was underperforming, but he hadn't been let go. Probably because he'd become too entrenched. Or too good at making excuses. The board was looking for a silent partner to inject cash and save face. My firm was interested, but hesitant. I wasn't. I scheduled a meeting with our acquisitions team. I want Saratech, I told them. We buy them out, restructure the board, and bring in fresh blood. Quietly. Someone asked why I was so certain. I kept my answer short. Because I know this company better than they think I do. Within a week, we made an offer. It was generous enough that no one questioned the lack of a public identity behind the deal. I used one of my offshore holding companies to maintain the anonymity. I didn't want them knowing who owned them. Not yet. The deal closed fast. Saratech's leadership was too desperate to stall. The press barely mentioned it, a small blurb in a financial column, buried beneath bigger acquisitions. But to me, it was a headline. Because 5 years ago, I walked out of a room full of people who laughed at me. And now, I was walking back in, only this time, they worked for me. The first leadership meeting was set for a Monday morning. The agenda was clear: introduce the new board representatives, review the transition strategy, and outline performance expectations for every department. I made sure Ethan's team was scheduled first. I wanted to see the look on his face when he realized who held the reins now. But I didn't make an appearance right away. Instead, I watched. From the observation room behind the one-way glass, I watched Ethan stroll into the conference room, still dressed like the king of his own kingdom, navy suit, hair too perfectly styled, fake confidence leaking from every smirk. He looked tired, though. Slightly more worn than I remembered. Maybe it was the pressure. Or the fear of slipping further down the ladder. He started presenting slides to the transition officers, pitching a revitalization plan that sounded decent on paper but lacked substance. The kind of strategy you draft in a panic. There were buzzwords and graphs and references to innovation, but no real foundation. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair like he expected applause. Instead, he was told to wait. They handed him a revised performance review outline and asked him to step outside while the new ownership made a final decision. He looked rattled. Just for a second. Good. I watched him leave the room, shoulders just slightly tense, and I let myself breathe. I had spent years preparing for this moment, not for revenge but for clarity. To know that I had built something stronger than my shame. That I wasn't the girl he discarded, I was the woman he underestimated. Now, it was time to introduce myself. I changed into a sharp black suit, hair pulled into a sleek knot, makeup minimal but precise. My assistant handed me the final board memo with the company seal already signed: Lily Carter, principal investor. I walked down the hall, heels echoing softly on the tile. With each step, I felt the old version of myself fall further behind. The girl in the borrowed dress, the one sitting on the cold steps, holding back tears, she wasn't coming with me. The assistant opened the door to the boardroom. Everyone stood. I walked in, took my seat at the head of the table, and finally spoke. Good morning. Let's begin. Silence. That was the first thing I noticed after I spoke. The kind that doesn't come from respect, but from confusion. Every executive around the table had seen my name on the acquisition memo. Lily Carter. But none of them had connected it to me. Not the woman Ethan once called his embarrassment. I let the silence stretch. Let them take it in. Then I began. As of this morning, I hold a 61% controlling interest in Saratech through Carter Holdings. Effective immediately, this board answers to me. Murmurs rippled. A few of the more seasoned board members exchanged glances. Others looked like they were trying to remember if they'd met me before. Ethan wasn't in the room yet. I had asked for him to be brought in last. Some of you may be wondering why I invested, I continued, voice calm but firm. The answer is simple. Saratech still has value. But its leadership has failed it. That ends today. No one argued. They couldn't. They needed me more than I needed them. I handed out the restructuring plan. It was brutal, but necessary. Entire divisions would be merged or cut. Executive bonuses frozen. A complete audit of middle management. I named names. Not in cruelty, but in clarity. Then the door opened. And Ethan walked in. He froze the moment he saw me. His eyes swept the room, then landed on me again. Slowly. Like his brain needed an extra few seconds to process what his eyes were seeing. I smiled. Not too wide. Just enough. Mr. Rhodes, I said. Have a seat. He sat, almost robotically, the cocky energy drained from him like water from a cracked glass. I believe you've already presented your plan earlier, I said. I've reviewed it. Unfortunately, it's not sufficient. He cleared his throat. Excuse me, sorry, I didn't realize you were the owner? I tilted my head. No, I imagine you didn't. He swallowed hard. I could see the panic crawling up his neck. Lily, Miss Carter, I corrected. Someone shifted uncomfortably beside him. I stood and walked slowly around the table, my heels tapping out a steady rhythm. Let me make something clear. Personal history aside, I'm here to save a company. That means cutting liabilities. That means holding people accountable for 5 years of decline. Ethan didn't speak. He looked like he wanted to say a dozen things and couldn't choose one. I stopped directly behind his chair. I'll be reviewing your department personally. I suggest you prepare your team for an evaluation. Effective immediately, your performance metrics will be assessed weekly. Any failures will be addressed swiftly. His shoulders tensed. Is that understood? I asked. He nodded. Quiet. Good. I walked back to the head of the table and took my seat again. That concludes this meeting. You may all return to your departments. I expect a revised compliance report by the end of day. Chairs slid back. People filed out, whispering to each other. Ethan lingered. When we were alone, he finally spoke. You bought the company? He asked, voice low, like he was still trying to believe it. Yes, I said. And now you work for me. He blinked. Why? I tilted my head. Because I could. He laughed once, dry and bitter. So this is payback? I leaned forward. You think too small, Ethan. You always did. This isn't revenge. This is business. You happened to be in the wrong seat when I bought the table. He stared at me. That old arrogant smirk trying to creep back into place. You were nothing 5 years ago. I smiled. You're right. And yet here we are. He stood up abruptly, like being near me was a threat to his pride. This won't end the way you think it will. I looked at him evenly. It already has. He left the room without another word. And I sat back in my chair, the weight of 5 years lifting off my chest. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about proving to myself that I'd never been the embarrassment. He was. And now, he had to face it, every single day. The first week after the takeover was tense. I expected resistance from the board, passive-aggressive defiance from senior staff, maybe even public pushback. But none of it came. Not yet. They were too shocked. Too busy calculating what version of me they should treat seriously. Ethan was another story. His once dominant presence on the floor had diminished into something quieter, more careful. The man who used to breeze through meetings with bravado now sat through every performance review with clenched jaws and darting eyes. I'd given his team a strict 60-day benchmark to show results, knowing full well he'd never meet them. He tried to test boundaries in the first week, subtle power plays. Canceling check-ins last minute. Sending his assistant instead of showing up himself. I didn't take the bait. I didn't fire him either. That would have been too easy. Too clean. Instead, I watched him squirm. Every day he had to walk into that building knowing the woman he mocked now controlled every outcome of his career. And I made sure he understood that control wasn't temporary. I wasn't just a passing investor. I was the future of the company he'd once boasted about like it was his own creation. He finally requested a one-on-one meeting. I accepted. He arrived 10 minutes early, dressed sharp but stiff, like he was bracing for a corporate execution. I was already seated when he walked in, reviewing the most recent quarterly losses his department had racked up. Miss Carter, he said, voice clipped. I didn't look up. Sit. He obeyed. You've been underperforming, I said. The numbers don't lie. I'm aware, he replied. But I'd like to explain, I cut him off with a glance. I'm not interested in excuses. I'm interested in why your name is tied to 3 failed rollouts in the past year and a customer retention rate that's dropped 11% under your leadership. He leaned forward, trying to sound composed. The market shifted. The tools we were using, you had the budget to innovate. You didn't. I set the report down and finally looked him in the eye. Your division is bloated, inefficient, and stuck in an outdated model. You're running this place like it's 5 years ago. Like you still matter more than the results. His face tightened. With respect, I've given this company everything. I put in years, and what did it give you in return? I asked. A podium to stand on while you humiliated people who weren't born into your world? He flinched. Just slightly. You think I'm doing this to hurt you, I continued. But I'm doing what you never could, holding this company accountable. I was trying to protect my career, he said, almost desperate now. Back then. I didn't mean what I said to you at the gala, I leaned in. You meant every word. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You'll restructure your team. Clean out dead weight. Report to me directly every Friday. And when the 60-day review hits, you better have numbers that justify your paycheck. If not, I'll reassign you somewhere you can't do any more damage. Like tech support in Tulsa. His jaw clenched. You're enjoying this. I stood up, collected my papers, and walked to the door. I'm not. You're not worth that kind of energy. Before I left, I added, but I will enjoy watching you finally learn how it feels to answer to someone you once dismissed. I didn't wait for his response. After the meeting, my assistant updated me on the ripple effect. Word was spreading, about the new tone, the new standards, the new boss who didn't flinch. Other departments began improving almost overnight. Middle managers who'd grown lazy under Ethan's regime suddenly remembered how to work. I wasn't just changing a company. I was changing the ecosystem that had once laughed me out of the room. And I wasn't done. That Friday, I hosted a leadership summit at a luxury hotel downtown. It was supposed to be about aligning future goals. But really, it was a test. I gave each executive 10 minutes to pitch a strategy, then I'd grade their viability in front of the group. Brutal, honest, and exactly what this culture needed. Ethan sat near the back, watching. When it was his turn, he stood slower than the others. His pitch was tighter this time. Less ego. More research. He'd learned. But it was too late for that to impress me. When he finished, I offered a polite nod and moved on. He wasn't the main character in this room anymore. I was. And this was just the beginning. The demotion wasn't public. I didn't need to make it a spectacle. Quiet consequences sting more when there's no audience to justify your fall. Ethan received the news by internal memo on a Monday morning. Effective immediately, he'd be relocating to Ceratec's regional office in Vancouver to oversee a strategic restructuring initiative. He wasn't fired. I didn't want that. I wanted him to live in limbo, important enough to still have a title, irrelevant enough that no one listened to him anymore. He showed up at my office door 30 minutes later, eyes stormy. You sent me away, he asked, voice shaking. I reassigned you, I corrected. Vancouver is a valuable market. Don't insult my intelligence, Lily. I looked up from my screen. I already did that once. I believed you when you said I wasn't enough. That won't happen again. He stepped closer. This isn't business. This is revenge. Do you hear yourself? I asked. You stood in front of your colleagues and called me a charity case. You laughed while they mocked me. You made sure I remembered that night every time I questioned whether I deserved to be in the room. I was under pressure. You didn't understand how much I had to prove. And I did? I stood. Do you think it was easy for me to build what I built? To be taken seriously as a woman in finance, in tech, in rooms where no one looked like me or respected where I came from? He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw it, that flicker of realization. That maybe I had become someone he never imagined. You disappeared, he said quietly. You didn't even say goodbye. You made it clear I didn't belong in your world. So I built one that didn't need you in it. He swallowed hard. I was wrong. I raised an eyebrow. About what? About you, he said. You were never an embarrassment. I was just afraid. There it was. The confession. Years too late. I don't need your regret, I said. I needed it 5 years ago, when I sat outside a ballroom alone while you toasted your future. He said nothing. Just stood there, stripped of the confidence he once wore like armor. You'll leave for Vancouver at the end of the week, I said. Your new office will be smaller. Your team will be smaller. But your expectations will remain the same. Produce results, or don't come back. He nodded, silent. As he turned to leave, I added, and Ethan? He paused. I'm not doing this for revenge, I said. I'm doing it to remind myself that I survived you. And that survival made me unstoppable. He didn't look back. That Friday, the office buzzed with quiet curiosity as Ethan packed up his things. His once loyal circle kept their distance, unsure how to navigate the shift in power. He walked out with a single box in his arms, head down, no farewell party. Just an elevator ride to a new life built on the ashes of the one he ruined. The following week, I was invited to speak at a private equity conference. They wanted to know about my mysterious rise, my unconventional investments, the sudden surge of interest in Carter Holdings. I stood on stage, dressed in white this time, a deliberate contrast to the shadows I'd once moved in. They asked me what motivated my investment style. I smiled. Sometimes, I said, we invest in things others have given up on. Not because they're easy wins, but because we remember being given up on ourselves. Applause filled the room. Cameras flashed. And somewhere, I hoped Ethan saw it. Not because I needed him to, but because I knew he never imagined I'd be the one standing here, owning the room he once told me I didn't belong in. Months passed. Vancouver suited Ethan more than he realized, or at least that's what he told HR when they called for his relocation follow-up. He managed to cut costs, streamline a few departments, and even score a modest client contract. On paper, he was surviving. But that's all it was, survival. No prestige. No headlines. No one clamoring for his opinion like they used to in the Saratech boardroom. Meanwhile, Carter Holdings thrived. The Saratech acquisition had drawn attention, and so did my rise as a once unknown force in the investment world. People started calling me the Phantom Founder, too clean, too sharp, too fast to be traced. And while the mystique worked in my favor, it also made certain men nervous. Especially those who had something to lose. I received an invitation in early spring. A private networking gala. Hosted by an elite industry group that had once turned me away. The theme was legacy and leverage. A chance for founders, CEOs, and partners to rub elbows and toast to their collective future. I RSVP'd yes. Not because I needed the connections, but because I remembered that ballroom. I arrived in a tailored emerald dress. No borrowed gowns this time. Every thread I wore had been paid for with my own hands. I walked past guests who whispered as they recognized me, some too late to have ever mattered. One of them was Margaret Vale, the same woman who laughed at Ethan's charity project comment all those years ago. She blinked twice when she saw me. "Lily?" she asked, stunned. "Margaret," I said smoothly. "You look exactly the same." She blinked again, flustered. "I heard you'd done well. That you bought, what was it?" "Everything I was once excluded from." She laughed awkwardly. "Well, I suppose you showed us all." "I wasn't trying to," I said, lifting a glass of champagne from a passing tray. "I just had better things to do than beg for space at someone else's table. So I built my own." I left her standing there, glass frozen midair. Midway through the night, I was approached by a journalist from a major financial outlet. She asked for a brief quote on my business philosophy. I told her this: people spend years building empires on arrogance. But they forget that shame is a stronger fuel. Humiliation stays with you. It sharpens you. She asked if the quote was personal. "Isn't every empire?" I replied. That weekend, the article ran with my photo front and center. From disgrace to dominance, how Lily Carter rewrote the rules. It went viral in finance circles. VCs reposted it. Podcasts debated it. Former colleagues messaged me with vague congratulations, hoping I'd forgotten who they used to be. And then Ethan called. The number popped up on my private line. I let it ring twice before answering. "Lily," he said. His voice sounded older. Tired. "Ethan." I read the article. I assumed. There was a pause. "I just wanted to say I'm proud of you," he said. "What you've done, it's impressive." "You don't get to be proud of me," I said gently. "You lost that right the night you chose to humiliate me for sport." "I know," he said. "Believe me, I know." I waited. "I think about it all the time," he continued. "About how easy it was for me to tear you down. And how hard you must have worked to build all of this." "You thought I'd disappear," I said. "But you made the mistake of forgetting that people like me survive quietly, and strike loudly." "I see that now." More silence. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "But if you ever wanted to talk, maybe over coffee, I don't need closure from you," I interrupted. "I got that the day I walked into your boardroom and watched you squirm in your seat." Another pause. "You really bought the whole company just to prove a point?" "No," I said. "I bought it because it was valuable. You just happened to be attached." He let out a dry laugh. "You really were never the charity case." "No," I said. "You were." Then I ended the call. I didn't save the number. I didn't need to. Because my story was no longer his to finish. A year later, Saratech had fully transformed. What once was a sinking ship run by bloated egos was now a streamlined machine leading in fintech innovation. The board was leaner, smarter. Customer satisfaction was at its highest in years. And our quarterly earnings had finally outpaced projections by a margin that made headlines. The world had a new narrative for me. No longer just the mystery investor or the reclusive founder. Now I was a name. A face. A keynote speaker. Which was how I found myself standing backstage at the Global Ventures Summit in Singapore, waiting to be introduced. The announcer's voice boomed through the ballroom. Please welcome to the stage, one of the most influential forces in modern investment, the CEO of Carter Holdings, Lily Carter. The applause hit me like a wave. I stepped onto the stage in a midnight blue suit tailored like armor. Cameras flashed. The crowd leaned in. I began my speech with a story. Once, I was told I didn't belong in the room. That my ambition was embarrassing. That I was lucky just to be standing next to someone more powerful. I paused, letting the words hang. What they didn't realize is that being underestimated is one of the most powerful positions you can hold. When no one sees you coming, they never think to protect themselves. The room was silent. Hanging on every syllable. I didn't rise because someone gave me a hand. I rose because someone pushed me down and thought I wouldn't get back up. After the speech, I returned to my hotel suite. My assistant handed me the updated report from Saratech Vancouver. Ethan's numbers were steady. Better than expected. He was surviving, but just that. No promotions. No praise. A message from him waited in my inbox. The subject had no title. It said you were right. About everything. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Instead, I closed the laptop and stepped out onto the balcony, overlooking a city that once would have felt too big for me. Now, it felt small. Manageable. Owned. My success wasn't built on rage. It was built on precision. I didn't just want Ethan to fall, I wanted him to watch me rise. Slowly. Publicly. Irrefutably. And he had. In the months that followed, my calendar filled with offers. Book deals. Joint ventures. Speaking engagements. People who once called me irrelevant now called me visionary. Investors who ignored me now begged for meetings. The world moved differently around me now. And yet, I didn't forget. I never forgot that girl in the borrowed dress. Crying in a car outside a ballroom while inside, the man she trusted laughed at her expense. She wasn't weak. She was waiting. Waiting for the day she'd walk into that same kind of room, not to beg, but to own it. That day had come. And I wasn't done yet. The next Langston Gala came exactly 5 years after the night that changed everything. Full circle. A quiet invitation had been sent to my office, likely by someone on the committee who assumed it would be good PR to invite the woman who now sat on every list of top power players under 40. I accepted. Not out of spite. Not even for show. But because the ballroom had once been the site of my downfall. And I believed in reclaiming old ground, not with noise, but with presence. I arrived late. Deliberately. Let them see me last. Let them watch every head turn when the doors opened and I stepped into the glow of the chandeliers. The same room. The same polished floors. But everything else had changed. I wasn't clinging to someone else's arm this time. I wasn't someone's plus one. I wasn't a girl hoping to impress people who thought my existence was a fluke. Now, they knew exactly who I was. Conversations paused when I passed. A few polite nods, some sheepish smiles. The ones who had mocked me before now acted like they barely remembered. But I remembered. And then, near the bar, I saw him. Ethan. He looked thinner. His suit wasn't tailored the way it used to be. He carried himself like a man still pretending he belonged, but now the cracks showed. He saw me before I saw him. And for a moment, he just stared. Then he walked over. Lily, he said softly. Ethan. You came. Of course. I glanced around. It's tradition, isn't it? He tried to smile. You look like I made it? I finished for him. He nodded. I read your last interview. The one in Forbes. You said something about never needing revenge. I don't, I said. I needed clarity. And I have it now. He hesitated. I think about that night a lot. What I said to you. I can't take it back, but I wish I could. You can't, I said. But you gave me something more useful than an apology. You gave me motivation. And honestly, I don't regret that. He looked at the floor. I thought I had it all figured out. I thought power meant control. But it turns out, real power is being the one no one saw coming. I tilted my head. I didn't need to be seen. I just needed to build something solid enough that you couldn't ignore it anymore. He was quiet for a long time. Is there a version of this where we end as friends? I considered it. There's a version of this where I wish you well. But I don't think friendship was ever really what we had, do you? He shook his head. No. I guess not. I reached for a glass of champagne from a passing tray. Enjoy the night, Ethan. Then I turned away, walking back into a room I had once fled from in tears. Only this time I wasn't the one hiding. I gave a short speech that evening. It wasn't planned, but someone handed me a microphone, and the crowd leaned in. I used to think rock bottom happened all at once, I said. But sometimes, it's a slow realization that the people you trusted most see you as disposable. But rock bottom doesn't end you. Sometimes, it builds you. Pause. And if you survive it, you don't just climb back up. You build something taller. And then you look down, not to gloat, but to remember how far you came. The room was silent. Then applause. And somewhere in the back, I saw Ethan lower his head. Not in shame, but in understanding. Because now, even he knew, he hadn't just lost me. He'd created the woman who would own everything he once thought she was unworthy of. And that was the final win. The kind that didn't need revenge. Just a quiet smile in a room full of people who finally knew exactly who I was.